Hello, I'm Sambrito Ghatak from Center for Atmospheric and Oceanic Sciences. So I'm very glad that the organizers today have asked me to say a few words in this beautiful ceremony. And I'm no expert, but as an as a enthusiastic organizer of the last year's program when we started it in this campus, I would like to share some of my fascination and some of fascinating stories about the language, its diversity and history and all. So this year the motto, the theme of the International Mother Language Day, as prescribed by United Nations, is fostering multilingualism. So whenever there is multi, there is many. There are many languages. There must be multiple fights. Human history is not always about love. It also about fight, and you cannot somehow bypass it while we are talking about history. But the interesting thing is, it's not like this is my language and I will force it upon you. This is not that simple. Let's take the case of the Bangladesh case. So we all know what's the significance of this 21st February, the Amor Ekushe, the immortal 21. That's event that happened in the then Pakistan, East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, and in that case, Urdu was imposed on the Bengali-speaking people in East Pakistan. And the guy who was the leader of this imposition, who in a meeting of Dhaka announced that Urdu and only Urdu will be the official language of Pakistan, was not himself an Urdu speaker. And he was a native Gujarati speaker, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and he was not even fluent in Gujarati. He was only fluent in English. So that's quite weird. It's not very obvious, and it's the story of language is always about multiple contradiction. So it's not very easy to find out the sets of rules of history. So that is probably what makes it so fascinating. So in India, we are proud that we have diversity, and that's quite true. From what we have learned in our school days is are not always true, but India is truly diverse. And 2011 census says that we have 19,569, almost 20,000 languages as mother tongue in India, and 121 of it has more than 10,000 native speakers. Now, I would like to share some fascinating story about how we came here in this diverse present, and how the history was, and how the journey was, the historical journey was in India from the perspective of language. So we all know that we can divide languages in language families. So in India there are mostly 6 language families. So I would like to talk about these 6 language families in a chronological fashion. So that it becomes a bit simplistic. So the uh, oldest language family in India is quite old. That's the Great Andamanese language family, and it came into the mainland India almost 60,000 years back. So it's not very easy to determine the exact time in history when it came, but and it's also not very easy to determine its evolution. So whether it was the it was close to today's form or not. Probably it was not. But anyway, the career of this language, at least, they came in this Indian mainland before 60,000 years. And then the Dravidian language family. And we mostly all our South Indian friends, they speak in this Dravid, in some language under this Dravidian language family. The Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, and so on and so forth. So it's the second oldest, and but its origin is somewhat debated and confusing, at least till now. People have argued that it might be connected to Indus Valley civilization, but as Indus script and Indus language is not deciphered and is not very clear, so it's very difficult to say. But from one other perspective, we can make some hypothesis. That is, from the perspective of population genetics and archaeogenetics, which became a very important key in the deep past nowadays, at least for last 10-15 years research. That's quite fascinating. And in the south of India's, most people most people have one genetic composition called the ASI, that is the archaeological South Indian. So there is no pure archaeological South Indian nowadays, but what it means is a particular guy may have inherited his 80% of gene pool from the old archaeological South Indian gene pool, which is reconstructed hypothetical past group. This archaeological South Indian, they are the people who made the Indus Valley civilization, and from the archaeogenetics, it's proven. So it is quite possible that somewhere in the late Indus or just after Indus, the Proto Dravidian languages started off their journey. The next one is the Indo-European language, which almost 80% of Indians belong to, and it mostly is confined in the north of the Vindhyas. Punjabi, Marathi, Gujarati, Bengali, Hindi, Odia comes under this language. And the time is, again, it was one of the hotly debated thing in Indian history, but nowadays the archaeogenetics has almost concluded it, that we don't know whether there was Aryan invasion or not, but there was, of course, migration. Whether you like to call them Aryan or not, that's another thing, but migration from the Middle Asian steppe, nowadays Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, that part, that happened almost 4,000 years ago. And they carried the Indo-European languages, Proto-Indo-European languages. So that's the geographical distribution. The third language, that is, chronologically whether that is third or sorry, fourth or third or second, that's very difficult to say. That's the Austro-Asiatic language group. Mundari, Santhali, Ho, mostly tribal people belongs to uh, this language group. So this is quite interesting that this language didn't came from west in India, it came from east. It somewhere evolved in southern China region, and then it occupied the Southeast Asian region of Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, and all. And from there, it came to eastward to India. Now it is mostly confined in Indian Bengal, West Bengal, Bihar, and Jharkhand, particularly Chotanagpur Plateau. But the time when it came is a bit unclear. Initial studies suggested it might be 10,000 years back. After that, some suggested that it might be 5,000 years back. Recent studies from the admixture suggested the mixing of this group with already existing Indian people happened in nearly 4,000 years or so. So we can place it after Dravidian and somewhere with the Indo-European in a time frame. And the next one is the Tibeto-Burmese and the Tai-Kadai language family. Tibeto-Burmese language family is like Meitei, Lepcha, and all. They came from, the name suggests, they came from Tibet Burma region. That's the highland, almost in Indian perspective, as the highland language family. And it's now mostly occupies the northeastern section of India. Yeah. So, but this geographical distribution, though, is more or less conclusive, but still there are few exceptions, and which is very intriguing and very fascinating. Just like in the north of Vindhyas, there are very little Dravidian languages. Uh, there is very little trace of Dravidian languages. There are some tribal languages in the central India and the eastern part, but north of that, it's almost invisible. But interestingly, there is one language in Balochistan region in Pakistan. This is called Brahoi. This Brahoi language is very interesting. It belongs to the Dravidian language. Now there are many theories why this Brahoi language is there, how it came there. So there are many theories, and two of them is very important. One is, people think that that's the connection of the Dravidian language to the Indus Valley civilization, that because the Balochistan is the region where Indus Valley civilization thrived, and probably it's the link. And the other theory is, in some time back, in maybe 1,000 or 2,000 years or so, some people from South India just migrated somehow to that place and occupied that place, and they carried the Dravidian language with them. Similarly, there is also some fascinating stories about Indo-European language family in India. In the south of India, you will find very little trace of Indo-European language, but its southernmost extent is the island of Sri Lanka. The Sinhalese people, the Sinhalese language is Indo-European. So it's again a puzzle. But the old text of Buddhist text of Sri Lanka, Dipavangsha and Mahavangsha, says that a prince from Bengal called Bijoy Singh, with his 700 followers, went there during the period of Buddha, went there and started their kingdom. So that's the mythical story. And nowadays genetic studies, some preliminary genetic studies have suggested that there the link between Bengali and Oriya people with the Sinhali people. So that might be a case of oceanic migration in the Indian subcontinent, and the oceanic migration of people and language. So these sort of puzzles always fascinates us, and from this we can take the journey of history and see the fascinating languages in motion. So that's another case. But now I would like to conclude. So India, of course, a diverse country, and in perspective of language. But when there are many languages, there must be many fights, and that's still visible in India. We know something, the term called Hindi imposition. Hindi, of course, uh, is making many local language, close languages in North India, like Magadhi or Rajasthani. They are threatened because of Hindi, and Hindi is of course becoming a bit pervasive. But so that's a problem that many people talk about and show their concern. But while we take any stance about this, we must remember that we should always stand the ground of our own mother tongue, but with a broad vision. Just for example, if in Bangladesh, uh, if my love for Bengali, my mother tongue, uh, makes a barrier to me to enjoy the ghazal, Urdu ghazals, or the beautiful poem of Ghalib, that's unfortunate. And also there is, when a language group holds some power, there is always a possibility that they will try to subjugate others. That's human nature, and that was also true in the classic case of Bangladesh. The iconic fight for language happened there, and after they made the Bengali the state language in the newly found Bangladesh, they imposed it on the tribal people. That's documented history. So in India, it's I have already said, it's also there. The fights are already there, and it was there everywhere in the world. But again, but again, uh, how to it's very complex case. So money or political influence always cannot guarantee the well-being of your language. For example, the Marwari community is, from the business perspective, is a very affluent and influential community in India, but their language is threatened because of Hindi. And similar thing can be applied to the Sindhi people, the Sindhi Hindus who migrated to India after partition. They are mostly well off and influential in maybe Bollywood or business sector, but still their language is also endangered in India. So history unfolds itself in very weird ways. So I cannot take any stand, or cannot uh, I don't want to make any particular comment like this is the way forward, or this should we should do this, or this should be done, something like that. No, but I just tried to share some fascinating story which will make way for future discussions and debates and all. But at the same time, we must remember that while standing our ground, we should have a broader vision. My love for Bengali and my stance against Hindi imposition shouldn't make a barrier to me and the great writings of the great author Munshi Premchand, or the film Satyajit Ray's film Sadgoti, which is based on a Premchand story. So let thousand flowers bloom, let all language thrive, and let all traditional knowledge and our culture and our historical historically evolved culture all thrive, and let us all interact and make a bright future. Thanks. uh, Thank you.